Good afternoon. Well, morning, whatever it is. I'm Paul Zeise, of course. It is the big show. We do the big show every single day. We try and have a good time with it. We try and talk about whatever is going on in the world of sports. And of course, when it comes to the Steelers, it seems like today we are always always in a place where we're talking about either the quarterback situation or T.J. Watt. And of course, T.J. Watt is the guy who is right now holding out. And there's been some interesting developments over the last couple of days. I don't believe for one second that it's not going to get done. Okay? I don't. I really think they're going to get something done with T.J. Watt. It's one of those things where I can't see how they're not going to come to the conclusion that they have to pay him his money. I know there's some insiders, however, that think that the Watt camp right now believes that they're probably a little too far off to make a deal. And so when you think about it that way, it's going to be very, very interesting because there is, and I think it was Adam Schefter, and of course, now the one thing you got to remember, and I say this all the time, this is the off season. And because it's the off season, I think that oftentimes a lot of stories have a lot more energy than probably they need to have. They get, to a point where you're sitting there and you say, I don't think all of these stories that come out in the off season have as much steak, so to speak. They're a lot more sizzle than steak because all of these guys that are insiders have to continually come up with storylines. They need to continually come up with, different angles. They need to continually have engagement and find a way to continue to make their sort of make their bones or whatever you want to say and get people to read their stuff. And so sometimes these stories get overblown. They're blown out a little bit. And I just think that in this case, I don't know that I see TJ Watt. They're talking about maybe this holdout goes even further into, the season even, and that he's going to hold out to get what he wants. I don't believe that it'll get to that. I really don't. And I think that when you think about, the Steelers and the way they do things, they usually come in at the, sometimes at the last minute, but they usually come in and they get it done. It's one of the things that comes down to, in my mind, if TJ Watt is a holdout and it looks like they're not going to be able to make a deal, they should trade him. I'm not saying that's where they are now, but I'll be honest with you. If really the problem that you have is that TJ Watt is too far away in terms of his, in terms of what he wants and what the Steelers are willing to give, if that number is too far apart, and it looks like there's not going to be a real easy path to get them together, I think at some point the Steelers need to think about trading him. And I know that that's one of those things where there's not a lot of people that want to hear that because everybody, is in love with TJ Watt. And, in this town, we seem to be obsessed with the idea of one helmet guy. I get all that. But I'm going to tell you, I just don't think for 1 minute, honestly, that you really can go into the season with TJ Watt holding out, because then he holds all the cards. And if he comes in, say, 3 or 4 weeks into the season, to me, you're better off trading him. I've said for 2 or 3 years, you're better off trading him anyway. I don't think he's worth the money. I don't think he's worth, all of what they give to, what they want to give to him. I don't think he's worth any of that. I don't. I think it's one of those situations where if you look at his production, especially in the playoffs, you know what? I'm not sure what you really get from him. That's the biggest thing. And I just think that's really where we're at with all of this, to be honest. I think what's funny is there's somebody who is out there who agrees with me in some ways, and he happens to have the last name Rooney. It's one of those things that is funny because Patrick Rooney Jr., I guess he's a member of Art Rooney II's family. He was on a podcast, and boy, did he have a lot of things to say about all of the different things that went on. One of his was that, there's this narrative the Steelers were like, we're going to go all in this year. What does that even mean? Do you think even if you had Aaron Rodgers from 10 years ago that you're going to be able to compete with Joe Burrow and you're going to be able to compete with Lamar Jackson? What in God's name does it make you think you're going to be able to compete with Baltimore and Cincinnati? I don't necessarily agree with that. I think the Steelers can beat Cincinnati. I think they can be better than Cincinnati, to be honest. I think they, but I get what his point is. But he basically said, Baltimore's a better team, yada, yada. That's not the big thing. But he also said, which I thought was really interesting, was that basically it's lunacy. Lunacy, he says, to pay T.J. Watt all this money. That is, to me, one of the things that's really interesting. He basically is saying that, you know what? It's one of those things where you look at it and says, I don't know that it's lunacy, but I actually kind of agree with him when it comes to basically this idea that, T.J. Watt is going to get all this money. I don't know if it's worth it. I mean, absolutely insane is what he said. Absolute lunacy. And he basically said, you're going to pay a guy $40 million, right? TJ is a great player, great Steeler, but it's insane to pay him anything right now. Absolutely insane. He's 31 years old, but again, if you're going all in this year, then you're going to have to re-sign him. You're making moves right now. You're trying to do something this year. That, to me, based on anything you've seen the last few years, seems insane. And again, the whole discussion came back from the fact that Adam Schefter said, that basically the Steelers and T.J. Watt are not close together. They're not anywhere close together. And so because they're not anywhere close together, it could turn into a situation where T.J. Watt actually holds out longer than just training camp. Now, my gut tells me that T.J. Watt will figure it out. Okay, my gut tells me that T.J. Watt will figure out, what needs to happen. And he'll figure out the fact that him with the Steelers is going to be his best path to finish his career the right way. Maybe even giving him the best chance to win, although he could go to a contender, I guess. And I think the other part of it is there will be a point where he probably will say, I don't necessarily need to be the highest paid guy. Like, if they're going to really pay me and they're going to give me a lot of guaranteed money, I'll even take a little bit less if they give me more guaranteed money than everybody else got. I'm just saying, like, really, when you think about it, I think that, cooler heads, calmer heads will prevail. I know it's business. It's not personal. Never is. Get it. Understand it. Understand all of that. But I also know that I think T.J. Watt wants to be a Steeler. I think he would like to stay with the Steelers, right? And I think that's the other thing is one of the things that it is going to be very interesting to see is what the contract actually looks like. Because I'm still in the frame of mind that it's going to get done. The Steelers are going to get it done. T.J. Watt's going to get it done. They're going to figure it out. T.J. Watt doesn't need to be at training camp. And actually, to be honest, given his age and everything else, I'm pretty sure that he not being in training camp will be a good thing for him. It'll save, his legs a little bit. It'll save his body a little bit. Not that he hits during training camp or whatever, but still it's 3 or 4 more weeks. You're on your feet and everything else. He's going to work out. He'll be, he'll probably hold in, I would assume, where he shows up and, doesn't do anything until his contract's done, although maybe he holds out. But either way, he's a workout freak. He's a workout freak. He's a guy that is going to be, in tip-top shape when he comes in. So you don't have to worry about that. He doesn't need to be at training camp. I mean, it's almost as silly as, the people that were upset because Aaron Rodgers missed OTAs. Who cares? When you're a veteran like that, you don't need to be at OTAs. You don't. You need to basically, make sure that you're at training camp a little bit. He's new. He's learning a new offense, so he needs a little bit of that, but not much. Come on, man. Come on. At the end of the day, he doesn't need, OTAs. He didn't even need mini camp, and he'd be fine. Veteran guys, what we found out, especially nowadays. I mean, one of the things about training camp nowadays is it's almost useless, I think. They're not allowed to hit. How many times? They have so few days where they're allowed to hit, and then they take a few extra days like that, and they make sure that guys get days off. They're not allowed to do 3 days anymore. The exhibition games are basically a waste of time for anybody that's a veteran. You're looking basically in those exhibition games to figure out who it is that you want to, cut and who it is that you want to keep on the bottom of your roster. That's what it's for. That's what training camp is for. You have all those guys that you bring in and give them an opportunity and a shot, and maybe one of them makes it. But really, training camp is for players, 40 to 60. Actually, probably maybe 35 to 60. 1 to 35, they don't need training camp. Just get just work almost in like shell drills and 7-on-7, and you'd be just as ready to go because there's so little hitting that actually goes on nowadays. But my point is, T.J. Watt doesn't need to be at training camp. He doesn't. He doesn't need to be at training camp if he doesn't, isn't going to be there. It's not a big deal. And I think that's the key. When you have a situation with a guy like him holding out doesn't mean a thing until you get close to the season, and it's like, okay, we need him. But guess what? A funny thing usually happens. Both sides understand. One side understands, if I hold out during the season, I don't get paid. The other side understands if we continue to squeeze for every nickel with the player and he doesn't play, it hurts our team because we need him to win games. It's funny how that works, isn't it? It's funny how that works. The other thing that's funny is it's almost never quarterbacks that hold out. It's always other position players because quarterbacks are going to get paid. The thing you have to ask yourself if you're the Steelers when it comes to T.J. Watt, is he worth what a quarterback is worth? And I know what some of this, the record without him is I think 1-6 in their last 7 games without him or something like that. They're also 0-4 in playoff games with him. And I think one of the things about it is he is a guy who gets worn down, gets beat up during the season, and I don't think he's quite as effective at the end of the year as he is now. And so, early in the season, he's a wrecking machine, a wrecking ball. As the season wears on, he becomes a little bit more easy to contain. He becomes a little bit beat up. It becomes a little bit more difficult for him to explode like he does and all that other stuff. And I think that you see that in playoff games, and it's why he's been a guy who really hasn't been a factor in many of these playoff games. Now, I will say this. Patrick Rooney said something else that I thought was very interesting, and we talked about this the other day. He basically said that the Steelers and the Dolphins traded head cases. They traded head cases, meaning Minka Fitzpatrick for Jalen Ramsey. And he's worried about Jalen Ramsey fitting in, and he's worried about Jalen Ramsey and whether or not he'll be able to, on some level, go out and still play at a high level without being a total pain in the neck. And I think that's one of those things where you look at it and you say, I think what you find with guys like Jalen Ramsey, in large part, now Antonio Brown was an exception because he's Antonio Brown, but in large part, okay, I think what you find is the first year with a new team, they're okay. The first year with a new team, they're still trying to get in and fit in, get along, go along, get along, whatever that saying is. That's what they're trying to do. So I think Jalen Ramsey will be fine. I do. I think he will be really, really good at, he'll settle in. As I said yesterday, I think he'll be really good on the back end for the Steelers. I think he'll be a guy that probably is going to be able to play opposite Joey Porter Jr. It won't actually even shock me if he's the number one corner. And that's the way it goes. So anyway, it's amazing to me what we're doing when we talk about Jalen Ramsey and where he fits, because I think that it's going to be it's going to be interesting to see if he's your first or your second corner. It's going to be interesting to see if he's your guy that is your shutdown guy, which is what they probably brought him to be, or if he's your guy that is, your second guy and Joey Porter's your shutdown guy, or if he's a guy that they use as almost like a hybrid safety. I think that's the key too, because I think there's a lot of things they can do with Jalen Ramsey. I mean, he's played safety before. He's played this before. He's played this situation before. And so, and if you think about it, he's done a pretty good job of being able to be somebody who is, a safety, somebody who's a corner, somebody who's played even in the slot a little bit. I mean, he's been that guy. And so the Steelers can use him in that way. And again, I think that if you think about what's happening with him, he's going to be somebody who probably, in my mind, is going to be a really important player for them. And I think that's where we talk about, did they make themselves better? I think they did. Because I think he'll be a better player in the secondary than Minkah Fitzpatrick was. At first I kind of thought, man, maybe it's a wash. I don't think it's a wash. I think Jalen Ramsey is going to be a better player for them. And I think the other part of it is, I think that he's going to be somebody who really is a big, big, big factor. He's going to be somebody that buys in. He's going to be somebody that plays well for them. And I think that'll be, a big, big part of what's going on. I mean, we look at it from that outsider's point of view. And like I said, they made their front line better. Now it's like, make your back line better. And I think they did. I will say this. I think it's going to be very interesting. Peyton Wilson probably is going to have to start at inside linebacker. It'll be interesting to see, how that works out, because I think he's a good player. But again, it's one thing to go from, the middle. It's one thing to go from the second string, so to speak, where you come in situations, and usually you come in situations that are going to be favorable to you as opposed to the other way around. In other words, they're going to put you in situations that you're going to succeed. But the reality is, once you move up to a starter, what happens? Well, now all of a sudden you're in situations, no matter what, you're going to play a lot more. You could be exposed. And I'm not saying he's going to get exposed. I'm just saying, when you look at where they're at, I mean, he's a guy who probably is going to have to be really kind of monitor what he does to see if he's able to really handle being a starter. I think he is. I like him. I think he's really good. But to me, that's a big question mark behind the defensive line is the two inside linebackers. Because I didn't think Patrick Queen was great last year. And I'm not sure that, Peyton Wilson will be able to really handle being a starter and an every down player. I think that's the key there. It really is. And so we'll see. We'll see what happens there. I think that, honestly, I'm getting to the point where I'm talking myself into this defense is going to be pretty good. With Cam Hayward, Derek Harmon up front, obviously Watt when he gets in, Highsmith, the two inside linebackers, I think Peyton Wilson will be good enough, I hope. And I like, the addition of Jalen Ramsey to the secondary. So to me, I don't think they're going to play 3 yards in a cloud of dust and try and win that way, even though Arthur Smith's offense sort of is kind of set that way. But I do think that it's going to be very interesting to see if they do sort of try and play to their defense, because I think their defense is going to be pretty good. They've tried to do it over the last couple of years and it hasn't worked out very well because their defense has had leaks and given up too many big plays and stuff. It'd be interesting to see what they do this year. Okay. Game's always on at Archie's. Get down to Archie's on Carson Street. Archie's, home of 80-cent wings Monday through Thursday, home of the Paul Zeise grilled cheese sandwich. Get down to Archie's. Enjoy a really good dinner, some drinks. When you tell Archie that I said hello when you get there, Archie's a great dude. So get down to Archie's on Carson Street in the South Side for wings, drinks, sandwiches, the grilled cheese sandwich named after me, and everything else. And also they have every single game you could possibly want on all of their screens. And actually, if you go in there and they don't have a game up there, you can just tell Archie, hey, Archie, will you put that game up there? And he'll do that for you. The Pirates are never, ever, ever not amazing to me. A week ago, we were talking about the Pirates and their 6-game winning streak. And we were talking about how, well, maybe they're turning the corner. You look at the games, they scored 9 against the Mets, 9 against the Mets, 12 against the Mets, 7 against the Cardinals. Then they won a squeaker 1-0, but then they scored 5 runs. I mean, if you add it up, we're talking about 43 runs over 6 games. 43 runs over 6 games, and not just 43 runs over 6 games. They outscored the other teams. It was, the Mets and the Cardinals 43-4. Maybe they're turning the corner. Well, put it this way. They had a 6-game winning streak, and in their last 12 games, they're 6-6. As they lose 4-3 last night to the Royals for their 6th loss in a row. The Pirates just never cease to be amazing to me. They just never seem to be able to get out of their own way and capitalize on any kind of momentum that they might have had. So the bottom line is, I think that the best thing that you can say is that at least now there won't be any flights of fantasy from the front office, from the owner, that somehow, some way this team is still a contender and can get back into the race and all this other stuff. Once again, you do the math, 38 games, 56 games, that means they've played 94 games. That means they've got 68 left, right? 68 left. In order to get to 81 wins, they need to win 43 more games, right? 43 more games out of 68 means 43-25. That's what they have to do just to get to 500. They're also, as I've said, now 9.5 games out of 4th place. 9.5 games out of 4th place. And if you look at the wild card race, they're now 13 games out of the wild card And guess what? They've fallen behind the Washington Nationals. The only team that's behind them is, the Rockies, who are making a bid to be the worst team of all time. I mean, you want to know how bad the Rockies are? Are you ready for this one? The Pirates' run differential is minus 45. The Rockies, minus 251. Awful. My point is, they've lost 6 in a row now to erase any goodwill they might have had after the 6-game winning streak. There's no convincing or fooling anybody. There is no convincing or fooling anybody now that they are ready to make some sort of a run, or that they're 2 bats away from being really good, or that all that stuff out the window. Go make the moves you got to make. Go make the moves you got to make. And the moves you got to make are moves based on the future and based on bringing some prospects in. And people are talking about Mitch Keller and, Brian Reynolds has a small no-trade clause. I'd trade him to somebody else. I don't care. But to me, if you're going to win in the future, you've got to basically take the money that you're paying Mitch Keller and Brian Reynolds, save it as much as you can so you can go actually have a little bit of money to spend on players next year. You also need to get some prospects in here. You need to stop kidding yourselves by playing these old guys, because it doesn't make a lot of sense. It really doesn't. And I think that's really, to me, what's going on. And I feel like it's going to be, really difficult to understand that for some people. I just don't think that, a lot of people really, really, really fully understand how far away this team really is. They're bad. They're bad. And there's no real path to them being good. People say, well, they're pitching next year, with Bubba Chandler and all these other guys. They've had good pitching. They can't hit. They can't hit. And if you're going to trade Heaney and Keller, you're trading 2 of your best pitchers away. You better hope these young guys that I keep hearing about that they're going to bring up, you better hope that they are able to figure it out, because they can't. One other thing, college football just around the corner. I saw a future Pitt over under for Pitt wins 6.5 in Vegas. I look at their schedule, and if they're not over 6.5 wins, if they're not over 7 wins, actually, there's a real problem, honestly. I mean, this is year 11, not year 3, not year 1, not year 4, year 11. I got to be honest with you. In year 11, with this schedule, the teams they're playing, if they're not over 7 wins, it's a real problem. I'm not saying you put Narduzzi on the hot seat and all that other stuff, but at some point, you have to ask yourself, because if they're 7-5 again, that'll be 9 out of 11 years he's lost 5 games or more. And while I think he's a good coach, and I think he does a good job, and I think he's really good for the players and all that other good stuff, puts a lot of guys in the NFL. At some point, you have to win a little bit more than than he has. And so I look at 6.5, and the guys in Vegas are usually pretty good. I'm like, 6.5 seems like stealing money. Betting over 6.5 wins, I feel like that's just way too low for them. Maybe I'm just being too optimistic, but I don't think so. I think I look at their schedule and I say they really, really better figure out a way to win 7 games, period. Because if they don't, it's going to be really a long, hard offseason.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.